And welcome on into the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey, back with you on a Tuesday. And George, I got to ask, look, is a door that's been closed for a while now slowly creeping back open? Monday Night Football, the Jaguars do lose to the Bengals. Unfortunate news. Also, Trevor Lawrence did get hurt. Looks to be a sprained ankle. We're unsure, at least as we're recording this, the time frame, if any, that he'll miss. So obviously that's unfortunate. We're not rooting and or happy to see Trevor Lawrence hurt. I just want to make that clear. But as a fact, if he's hurt and has to miss time, that Jaguars team is different. Jags 8-4, Colts 7-5. George, we've been talking about playoffs the whole time in the sense of a wild card. Is it time we start talking about the Colts getting back in the division race? Is the door open for the AFC South crown?
I mean, it is a tiny little sliver open. You know, you can see daylight now in the door hinge, but that's about it. Just because of losing both games against them, I think that's such a huge factor here, and it's why we were so down on division champion possibilities since they lost that game in Jacksonville. Because when you don't have the tiebreaker in the NFL, life gets really difficult. You're basically still 2 games behind them. I know it's 1, you know, in the standings, but with that tiebreaker, it's effectively a game and a half deficit, and there's only 5 games to play. So, you know, they're gonna need. I don't think they can afford a loss the rest of the way, unless, you know, Trevor Lawrence is really done for the year, which does not appear to be the case, and they don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the one thing about this year in the NFL, there's been so many injured quarterbacks, and every team has sort of reacted to it differently. You've got the Jets, who apparently don't even have a quarterback they can field on Sunday.
That wants to play.
That wants to play, which is just that's a whole other pod. But
George, you thought the circus was bad last year with this Colts team. Imagine we were doing a podcast where the starting quarterback doesn't want to play.
He's reluctant to go back in. Just the fact that there was a legitimate report yesterday from a legitimate reporter that Zach Wilson would play if directly asked. Like, that's just sounds like the kind of thing that happens with my middle school basketball team. Well, if we directly ask the 7th grader, she will play in the game. No, this should not be happening. Of course, I think the 7th grade team is probably a little better run than the Jets as an organization overall, but
true.
2 is a different thing. But when you look at that end of it, then you've got the Colts that are sitting in a playoff spot right now with their backup quarterback and Gardner Minshew. The Bengals last night looked incredible with their backup quarterback a week after they looked feeble with the same backup quarterback. See, all of that to say we have no idea how Jacksonville's going to react with their backup quarterback. And the schedule, I mean, you did a good job last night calling that up. There are some difficult games in there. It's not a murderer's row type of schedule. It'll be really interesting to see how that changes. I think Houston has the door open a little bit wider because they split with Jacksonville. And I know at that point it goes to division games, which the Texans can't win that tiebreaker either because they already have 2 losses in the division. And Jacksonville only has 1, but they only have 1 game left. So the best they can do is tie that criteria, and then you start getting into the really minutia, and at that point it's almost luck as much as because there's no way you could focus on any of those tiebreakers beyond, you know, head-to-head in your division record. No one's in training camp going, hey, let's make sure our points margin is where it needs to be, guys. But that, I think Houston has a chance, but I think too, if you're a Colts fan, you're rooting for Jacksonville to win the division, because if Houston wins the division, you know for a fact Jacksonville's got the tiebreaker over you in the wild card as well.
That, I think, is a great and important point for fans to remember going forward. You're right. The best, and look, the Colts win out. They're in the playoffs, right? That's obviously the best. That's the best path to action for them. But secondary, like if you are going to then rely on other teams' results, then you're right. Then you need the Jaguars and should be rooting for the Jaguars to win the division. Because like you said, getting swept in that season series, the Jaguars are going to own every tiebreaker against you. And with only 5 games left, it's going to be really damn hard to overcome that big tiebreaker. Like, for example, like we were doing the math yesterday, right? The Jaguars 8-4, Colts 7-5. whether it's for the division or let's just say if the Texans go on a run and they don't lose another game, if you're the Colts here, like in order for you to overtake the Jaguars, and the Jaguars' 5 games remaining are this: at the Browns, home against the Ravens, at the Bucks, Panthers at home, at the Titans. So Browns and Ravens obviously are 2 challenging games, whether Trevor Lawrence is there or not. The other 3 games are layups, without a doubt. But even if let's just say the Jaguars lose the next 2, whether Trevor Lawrence is there or not, and they go 3-2 to finish the season, in order for the Colts to overtake the Jaguars, again, for the division or even for a wild card spot, you got to go 5-0. They can't lose another game. And that would obviously mean you tie in the other 2 wins they've had. So far, you're on a 7-game winning streak. Well, really, that'd be a 9-game winning streak, right? When it's all said and done. If you had that'd be a 9-game winning streak if you add in the Panthers and Patriots games as well. So in order for the Colts to overtake the Jaguars, they have to finish the year on a 9-game winning streak. Now, the schedule is there for the taking. That's a lot to ask, right, for this team to win now 5 more games and then root for the Jaguars to lose 2. So and if the Colts lose 1 and they're 4-1, you need the Jaguars to go 2-3. So the odds, like you said, it's a possibility, right? You are absolutely alive. And again, those next 2 games for the Jaguars in the Browns and Ravens are tough, are very tough, whether Trevor Lawrence is there or not. But you need a lot to break your way. That's another reason I think it's a great point. Something I didn't really think about, George, when it comes to just like the playoff race. One of the best things for the Colts to get in the playoffs is having the Jaguars win the division, because you still control right now the tiebreaker over the Texans. And obviously facing them week 18 at home, you control your own destiny in that game versus now against Jacksonville, where you have no tiebreaker going against you, which makes it, again, with only 5 games left, so difficult to jump them. I think that's a really good point and really smart too. You got to be now, if you're a Colts fan, to steal this from, at least Craig Carton used to do this with Mets fans and Yankees fans, Colts fans for Jaguars.
Yeah, well, and one way or the other, you either need the Jaguars to win the division or to completely fall apart. Like,
that's true. Lose every game.
1-4, like,
good point.
One way or the other. It can't be anything in between, because, like you said, just 3-2, and there's almost no way the Colts can overcome that. If the Jaguars just go 3-2, and if they go 5-0 down the stretch, hats off to the Colts. That's still, I know the schedule is not terribly difficult the rest of the way, but again, the Cincinnati game looks harder this morning than it did yesterday morning. And you don't know what's going to happen with some of these other contests along the way as well. I mean, the Falcons are obviously scuffling, but they lead that division. And I'm sure at home that late in the year, they're going to be fired up. They might have a chance to clinch that division, depending on what happens, in the next couple of weeks when the Colts get down there. So I think that's just the thing about the NFL. Like, you can sit there. I'm sure Jacksonville going into last night was fired up. It's the first Monday night game since, I don't know, the Carter administration or something. It was a really long time since they had last played on Monday Night Football. And you're playing a Bengals team with a backup quarterback. I'm certain they went in there believing that they were going to win on national television, show everybody why they could be the AFC's top seed. And not only do you lose the game, your quarterback's health is in question. I'm sure Adam Archuleta is worried about his shoe right now and how it fits. But it is such a strange league from week to week that, yeah, right now it looks good, these 5 games, but you don't know how they're going to look on game day. And the Colts, I think, are not in any, this is obvious, but they're not in any kind of position right now to look ahead. The only thing that matters to Indianapolis right now is Sunday in Cincinnati. Nothing else can even be on the radar.
And that game on Monday night was huge for 2 reasons, right? Obviously, number one, the Jaguars lose and Trevor Lawrence gets hurt. So now if you're a Colts fan, you could start looking at the AFC South. And again, it's a slim possibility, but now the door is open more than it really ever has at any point this season. But also on the flip side, from Cincinnati's perspective, with them winning, they're now 6-6. And you look at these, George, this AFC race is insane. From spots 5 to 11, that's 7 teams. Either they are separated by 1 game, 7-5 to 6-6. So you have 7 teams bunched together fighting for 3 spots with 5 games left. I would argue now, George, especially with Cincinnati winning last night, Monday night, looking how they did. Now all of a sudden you hear this team talking after the game. There's confidence. They believe in Jake Browning. These next 2 games, George, against the Bengals and against the Steelers, which, by the way, now that we officially are removed from Sunday's postgame pod, it has come out and official. Kenny Pickett has had ankle surgery. and is not officially ruled out, but it's a 2 to 4 week injury, it would be, I think, very surprising, George, to see him under center when the Steelers come to town next Saturday. So you, at least with the Colts, you got to envision Mitch Trubisky starting. So 2 backup quarterbacks, but either way, the Bengals and the Steelers, one team directly in front of you in the Steelers, one team directly behind you in the Bengals. George, forget about these games counting double. These next 2 games here count as triple in the standings with how many teams are so closely bunched together and how important, again, with limited games left, how important these tiebreakers are going to be. We just talked about it with Jacksonville, how hard it is for the Colts, despite them being 1 game behind, how hard it is for them to jump the Jaguars because the Jaguars own the tiebreaker. If you lose to the Bengals, you lose to the Steelers. I mean, God forbid you lose both these games. You lose both, George, the season might be over. But with how close everyone is, the season is over if you lose both these games.
I think that is a very, very real possibility. If you lose both these games, you're sitting at 7-7, and even the 6-6 teams right now, they're only a game out of the playoff spot, but there's 4 teams that are a game ahead of them. And like you said, there's only 3 playoff spots. So my math is, that's not a good situation to be in. If there's 3 spots and there's 4 teams ahead of you, and if you're 7-7, when this is all said and done, there's a good chance you're going to be in a similar boat. Now we don't know. You know, it's crazy right now because Houston was for a while the hottest team in the NFL, and still playing pretty good. They lost Tank Dell as well too. When we talk about injuries, that's a massive one, and he is done for the year. He had surgery on his fibia, I believe, broke his fibia, and is out for the season. And that's like we were talking about with Trevor Lawrence earlier. You hate to see that. An exciting young player has been such a big part of that incredible passing game that they've had, and he's out. So we'll see, how that affects them going forward. But right now, Houston, for everything they've done this year, CJ Stroud leading the NFL in passing yards, them being one of the surprise teams, D'Amico Ryans obviously right up there with Shane Steichen is coach of the year candidate. They're out of the playoffs right now. They are in that 8th spot, even though they have the same record as the 3 wildcard teams. Pittsburgh and Cleveland, we just talked about with them, both of them playing backup quarterbacks. I think Cleveland's down to their 4th quarterback now.
Joe Flacco.
The Super Bowl winning quarterback, Joe Flacco. So you've got Cleveland, sitting there with a backup quarterback. Pittsburgh right now for the foreseeable future, playing a backup quarterback. They're in the 5 and 7 spots on either side of the Colts right now, who are 6th. And then you've got right behind them, Denver, who was the hottest team in the league before they lost to Houston this week, and Cincinnati, who just came alive with this. And then, oh, by the way, the Buffalo Bills, who I think everybody thought would be comfortably in a playoff spot by now. So, yeah, you look at all that, and the Bills, I would say the Bills are the most desperate team of these 7 for the simple fact that they've got no chance of winning their division. Miami has run away and hid with that. They probably can clinch here pretty soon. They got a 3-game lead with 5 to go. You figure in a couple weeks they can wrap this up. So the Bills absolutely have to get a wild card. There's no way they're getting in as division champ. You gotta believe Sean McDermott is on a massive hot seat to where even if they make the playoffs, his job may still be in jeopardy. I would think of the 7 teams that are 7-5 or 6-6 right now, Buffalo probably needs to make the playoffs more than any of the other ones. They also have the hardest schedule of all of those teams. So I just think that is going to be really fascinating. I can't remember. I don't know about you. I can't remember any time in recent history where you had a wild card race like this, where there are so many teams with legit any of the 7 right now. You could see finishing in that 5th seed and being the top wild card, and you could see sitting home watching the playoffs.
No, I can't remember a race like this where there's, again, 7 teams this late in the season competing for 3 spots and all being bunched up so close. I know I can't. It reminds me really of college football this year, where it's like we've had a year where there were going to the final weekend, 8 teams for 4 spots competing for it that had a chance to make it. It's just like you never going into the year, it's absolutely a possibility, but you rarely see it play out where so many teams are so close together. I think it's a really good spot for the league to be in, because now it's so exciting this last 5 weeks here. But like you talk about desperation, George, like I'm with you, by the way. The Bills, they got expectations, talent, jobs on the line, difficulty of the schedule. They are by far the most desperate. I would argue like the Colts are up there too, just because of, we're talking about these next 2 games again against the team directly behind you and directly in front of you in the Bengals and the Steelers. You already lost a game to the Browns right now as well. So they have the tiebreaker over you with so little time left. Again, you lose these next 2 games, George, your season is cooked. You're not going to, for the most part, overtake these AFC North teams specifically, all 3 of them having a tiebreaker over you. And then the Texans coming to town as well. If you can't beat them, like there are so many games here where we highlighted the importance for the Colts down the stretch here going 5-2. But now I think we have to even up the ante here and up the importance of these next 2 games, but especially this game in Cincinnati, because you were, like said, with everyone so close, you got to, with nothing else, 2 things. 1, give yourself, the tiebreakers, but also 2, give yourself some breathing room, because we talk about, I don't think they're going to go 9-0 down the stretch. I think they are going to slip up here and lose a game. And if you lose a game, you at least got to give yourself an opportunity, whether it's the Falcons, whether it's, 2 years ago, deja vu returns and you lose to the Raiders at home with a chance to coach a playoff spot. Whatever that loss is, you at least have to give yourself an opportunity to say, this is not going to be a backbreaker. And winning these next 2 games against the Bengals and Steelers afford you the last 3 games of the year, afford you a loss, afford you a flat performance. And it's not a season-ending L. It's huge here. It's obviously huge. But now I think these 2 games, like we thought, 1, it was going to be a loss when Joe Burrow was playing and the Bengals looked like they really turned the corner. Okay, they're going to lose this game. Then all of a sudden he gets hurt. Oh, wow, now the Colts are going to win this game, no problem. Now it's like, oh, wow, Jake Browning's playing well. The Bengals, we thought their season was over. Now they're 6-6. They win this game. We'll see how everything else shakes out on Sunday, but they win this game and they beat the Colts. They are, I'm assuming, in a playoff spot, at least holding one. It's close. So their desperation now is all of a sudden palpable, and they are now playing for a lot as well. This is a huge moment for this team here, and it's going to be, again, a game that I would say counts for 3.
But there's no doubt. These next 2 games are going to feel like playoff games. You can probably, like you said, get away with 1 loss in that mix and still be in the picture, but that team is going to have that advantage over you, which is never good. Because of the tiebreaker. But at 8-6, you're probably not out at that point. 7-7, you probably are. When you're 7-7 and 3 teams in that mix have tiebreakers over you, it's going to be hard. Not impossible, but hard. You definitely have to go 3-0 the rest of the way at that point. And then you're going to need some help, probably. 10 wins will probably still get you in, but I don't know this year. That's going off normal years. And who knows what that – there may be 4 teams with 10 wins out of this group. There's 3 right now at 7-5. There's 4 right now at 7-5.
Yeah.
So if they all go 3-2 down the stretch, they'll all be 10-7. And if you have at that point, just on those 7-5 teams, Pittsburgh and Cleveland have tiebreakers over you, it's not going to be a good situation. You better have beaten Houston and make sure you get. Now, the other thing is, and this goes for the division too. The other picture to root for, you either want Jacksonville to win the division so that you don't have to deal with their tiebreaker in the wild card, or you want Jacksonville to collapse so that you have a chance to win the division. 3-way ties get interesting too. That's the other thing. Right now, Cleveland has the tiebreaker head-to-head on the Colts, but the Colts are ahead of Cleveland in the playoff seeding right now because it's a 4-way tie between Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and Houston, and I'm not sure, it must be conference record or something they went to, but the Colts are actually in that second spot because of it. So it's those things add into it too. If there's a 3-way tie atop the division, it gets a little bit different. All of which is to say, win these next 2 games, sit there at 9-5, like you said, get some breathing room, and you're going to feel better about yourself. You're not in. It won't be done, but you will, like you said, you will have the ability to slip up on Christmas Eve and against Atlanta, even possibly slip up against the Texans at the end of the year. If you're sitting at 9-5 now, because and it's good practice for a young team. I mean,
Yes.
I hope they're playing a playoff game in January, but you go to Cincinnati on Sunday and it should be a playoff atmosphere. The Bengals are certainly going to treat it that way because I haven't looked at their schedule, but they've got to at least play one of the Browns, Ravens, or Steelers again because everybody plays a division opponent in week 18. They probably are looking at this as a must-win game. I know they were last night because the difference for them between 6-6 and 5-7 is tremendous. And they're still in a boat where everything we just talked about that applies to the Colts applies to them. If you lose to Indianapolis, you're 6-7. You're 2 games behind them at that point because the Colts will be 8-5, and they have the tiebreaker on you. It's a must-win game for the Bengals, and that to me means it's a must-win game for the Colts.
You look at right now the AFC playoff race, right? Steelers right now the 5 seed, 7-5. At least according to ESPN, this is their rankings on the NFL. Browns have the 6 seed, 7-5.
Okay,
Colts have the 7
okay.
seed, 7-5. Texans have the 8 seed, 7-5. Part of the reason is obviously the head-to-head Colts lost to the Browns, but also too Steelers, Browns, Colts right now, right? The 3 teams in the playoff spots. One of the tiebreakers you just mentioned before is conference record. All 3 of those teams 5-3. The Texans right now are 4-3. So again, like we talk about importance of not just holding the tiebreaker. The first one is head to head, right? The Colts lost that one to the Browns. They have the next 2 against the Bengals and the Steelers, chance to claim that number 1 tiebreaker. Then also after that tiebreaker is right conference record. And so you have 3 teams right now, the 3 playoff spots, all the same conference record. The Texans are right there knocking on the door, 4-3. Playing right now 1 less AFC game than the other 3 teams. It like we talked about in the bye week, right, George? Like 10 wins should get you in. And it was kind of like we talked about it. Really, no matter how you win those 10 games or go 5-2 down the stretch, you got to feel in. I think now we're starting to see not only getting to 10 wins is important, but also who you beat on your way to those 10 wins. Because it is absolutely possible you can be 10-7 and out of the playoffs based on, like I said, the tiebreakers and who you beat and who you lose to. It's like, I mean, again, to use another college football analogy here, like we just saw Florida State get left out of the playoff at 13-0. We would assume going into any year, a Power 5 champion 13-0, they're automatically in. Like, doesn't matter who you beat, doesn't matter how you look and who's playing, you're 13-0, you're in. And now, obviously, you had to recalibrate those expectations because now you saw a lot of competitive teams in there and Florida State got bounced. If you're the Colts, I think no more. It's just like, oh, we got to get to 10 wins no matter what. Now it's like not only getting to 10 wins, but it's also important of who you beat on your way to getting 10 wins, which is now another reason why I think these next 2 games here have really increased in importance over the last week, but really even over the last 24 hours with the Bengals result on Monday Night Football here. It just only heightens the importance because of all these tiebreakers coming into effect. And with so little time in the season, you can't afford to lose 1 tiebreaker, let alone 2. And that's really what's at stake here with the Colts in these next 2 games, head-to-head and also conference record.
And that's why the Tennessee game was so huge on Sunday. Winning that game in overtime. I mean, obviously, it's the difference between still being in the playoffs at 7-5 and being in that Group 1 game back at 6-6. But it's also the conference record. You know, you're above 500 in the conference because you won that game. That's going to be critical down the stretch. And it's why when you say these games count triple, that's exactly why they count triple. You need the win, period. I mean, as tight as the race is, you have to win the game, period. But then you're going to get the head-to-head tiebreaker with the win in these next 2. And their conference opponents, it literally is triple. There are 3 things here that are going to be impacted by a win. Your regular record, your conference record, and the head-to-head battle between these 2 teams. And I would imagine Cincinnati can get pretty crazy in these home games. I would imagine it's going to be a pretty raucous atmosphere on Sunday over there. But, you know, it was interesting because Tennessee, I don't know if they showed much on TV, but like the second and third deck was not very full. There were a lot of empty seats straight across from the press box on that side of the stadium. But you still was extremely loud in there. And they were, as that game went on, I mean, they were fired up because they weren't happy with the referees. But but the game obviously was so tight, and they're coming down to that final drive. They're at full throat until they got to the 4-yard line, and then they all started to leave, which we were like, did you watch the rest of the game? The Colts have not been good in the red zone. Where are you going? But they all knew, apparently, that Michael Pittman was going to run to the back of the end zone and get a dart there and end the game. The point is, the Colts have seen that atmosphere already. I think that's important, too. Baltimore was a really loud and very difficult environment to play in. Cincinnati is going to be that way on Sunday. And if form holds, there will be as many Steelers fans in the stadium on Saturday, the following Saturday, as there will be Colts fans. And the Steelers travel really well. Every time I can remember they've played here, it's like a 50-50 crowd. So that's another thing I think the Colts are going to deal with these next couple of weeks, is just trying to, win in a definitely hostile environment and win in something that is not going to necessarily feel like your normal home game environment. Those are important elements here too.
I think those hostile and loud crowds actually benefit the Colts, because if you go back 2 years ago, again, different team, I understand it. But part of the reason why they got left out of the playoffs is they went on that big midseason run. And then I think we're emotionally gassed. Like after that win in Arizona with a banged up offensive line in a back and forth game, like that was just emotionally draining on Christmas Day. And you saw the next 2 weeks against the Raiders and against the Jaguars, they were flat. They laid an egg. And that is one thing I'm not going to say I'm worried about yet, because it is a different team and Shane Steichen has brought a new energy. But that is one thing where human nature does come in. Like when the Colts are playing for their playoff lives, and basically because how close everything's been, this last month has been sort of playoff-like atmospheres that's only increasing and ratcheting up intensity as each week gets closer to the end of the season. And I think going to hostile environments almost gives you that extra juice, where like if they were going against the Bengals, let's say, and the Bengals were 3-10, and you have, a half empty stadium on a cloudy 1 o'clock day in Cincinnati, I think it's easy to let your guard down. I think it's easy to go into that game saying, oh, we got this game, and come out flat and lifeless and stumble. I do think now that the Bengals winning in a weird way obviously increases the intensity and I think increases the importance of this game. But I think it also helps prevent a letdown emotionally, because you're going to a charged atmosphere against a motivated team that now all of a sudden is believing that they have a real chance to make the playoffs here. I think it does help this team emotionally to not allow a letdown to happen, at least going into this week, like we saw in 2021, that ended up ruining their season because they just emotionally were drained by the time the last 2 games came.
I think you saw some of that last week. I mean, Tennessee's 4-7. The fact that it's a division opponent, there was going to be more energy in that game because of it. And then you get out there and the crowd is reacting the way they are. And I think it did help them in a game that they did stumble, quite a bit. But they were able to come back and recover. And I think part of that is, it's a rivalry, obviously. And so you're going to be fired up for that. But I think the fact that you're in this wild card race, you're going to approach this similar way. The Bengals aren't necessarily a rival. You don't see them every year, but there's huge proximity between the two franchises, obviously. And just the fact of, we've been talking about this whole pod, that you've got 7 teams right now, which is crazy. There's 16 teams in the conference, and 7 of them right now are all knotted up between either 7-5 or 6-6. That alone, that environment should have juice for every game. You're playing one of those teams, and it's on the road, and the next week you've got another one of them. It's a perfect situation for the Colts, because I think even if you end up not getting a playoff spot when all this is said and done, the games that they're having to play to get there, I think, are still giving these young guys a ton of experience. And on Sunday in particular, we won't go too much into this because obviously Thursday, you want to hit the subscribe button now and be ready to get your notifications for the preview on Thursday. But you got T. Higgins out there. You got Jamar Chase out there. You got Joe Mixon out there. Yeah, Joe Burrow's not there. You got a defense that the last few years has really stood up in the playoffs and played tremendously. Not necessarily during the regular season, but come playoff time, that Bengals defense has been really stout. It's an opponent that is, outside of the quarterback, and the way he played last night, not outside the quarterback, including him too, a playoff caliber opponent on the road. It's almost a perfect game for the Colts to play right now. At this point, you're trying to get in the playoffs. You're a young team. You're trying to learn. how to win games like this, you're going to now go play a team that has been there, that's been to a Super Bowl, back-to-back AFC championship games. Yeah, their quarterback's gone. But the rest of that team is incredibly experienced. They've been in environments like this. They know how to handle it. You got to learn. I think it's going to be a really good matchup in that regard.
And timing could not be more perfect too, George, for the return of Grover Stewart. It's been a long 6 games. He is finally back. I think just his presence alone now is going to give this team extra juice and a big-time lift. And defensively, they need it. Oh, do they need him back in the worst way, George? If you look at some of the splits in terms of the Colts rushing defense with Grover Stewart in the lineup versus Grover Stewart out of the lineup, it is scary. Like, you look at them the first 6 games of the year. Colts defense is allowing 113.5 rushing yards per game. Without Grover Stewart, these last 6 games, they're allowing 153 rushing yards per game, 40-yard difference with Grover Stewart in the lineup versus Grover Stewart out of the lineup. Now, you are facing a Bengals team. Again, we'll dive more into this on Thursday in our Bengals-specific preview. But you are facing a Cincinnati team that statistically is the worst rushing team in the NFL. But you did have Joe Mixon have a really strong game yesterday, Monday night. And it's while some of the rushing attacks, George, for the Colts the rest of the way aren't great, like the Raiders, second worst rushing team in the league. You do have some teams that are right there in the middle. Falcons have been one of the better ones at 6th. Steelers 14th right now in terms of rushing yards per game. Texans 24th. You're facing some dynamic running backs. Again, Joe Mixon. We saw Bijan Robinson, when Arthur Smith lets him play, is pretty good. Najee Harris has been disappointing, but Jalen Warren is a tough runner, and he's been bursting onto the scene as well here. The Colts are going to have their hands full with just the running backs that they're going against. And again, the stats don't lie. They have just been abysmal no matter who they've been facing in terms of stopping the run. This is the return of Grover Stewart could not been better timed for him coming back this week against the Bengals.
No, there's no question about that. That was a happy locker room in every regard, obviously, on Sunday, because they got the win, and it was last second and a division opponent and a sweep and all those things. But I think the biggest smile from anybody in that locker room was DeForest Buckner when somebody asked, Grover's back next week, and how excited are you? Because he's been doing a lot of work in there. They had, rotation of guys playing next to him. You get Grover back now, and he's got his tag team partner, and you go in there, and like you said, an environment that's going to be hostile against the run game has not worked most of the year. It did on Monday night. But Joe Mixon is a dangerous running back. We all know that. We all know what he's capable of. Grover's going to have to get in there. But I also think the Colts have to be, careful here, because Grover will definitely make an impact. There's no question about it. You just threw the numbers out there. The difference with him in and out of lineup is tremendous. But a lot of these runs have gone to the outside with Tampa Bay and with Tennessee, even, getting outside tackles. And so Grover's not going to impact that as much. So you got to be ready. I mean, the linebackers have got to step up and have a better game. Corners have got to be ready to tackle because you're out there on the edge. It's going to be huge. The other part, and we should have an update on this on Thursday as well. We keep saying this every week, but, it does sound like Juju Brents is getting close. And that would be huge as well if he's able to go this week. We do not know yet. And even if he returns to practice this week, I don't know if he'll be right. If he'll be one of those guys who can go right back in. But again, looking at that, the wide receiver core that you've got over there in Cincinnati, getting Juju Brents back would be a really big lift. Darrell Baker played a really good game on Sunday against Titans. I think he's done a much better job since he came back into the starting lineup here this most recent stint. Jalen Jones has had a really nice rookie season he's putting together. You can get Juju back out there. He's just more physical than anybody else in that group. He's a different guy. That would help tremendously too. So you can get Juju and Grover back, even more for this playoff push. But yeah, I think in many ways the playoffs begin for the Colts this week. It's not literally the playoffs because you're not one and done. But I think you've got to treat them like playoff games, and they have a huge amount of importance. These next two especially. But then, Atlanta's potentially a playoff team right now. I mean, they could very well win that division. And the Raiders are not a playoff team, but I'm sure would love nothing more than, like you said, to come in here and ruin the Colts season again, although that got them in the playoffs the last time. And then obviously the Texans game at the end of the year could be potentially, if we really want to get ahead of ourselves, the Sunday night game that week.
What a difference a year would make, George. Where last year we're literally just counting down the seconds to the season ending with that Texans game, and now maybe a year later, possibly same week, same stadium, whole different thing, whole different meaning to the game and what's on the line there. Yeah, I get a big credit to both these teams, Colts and the Texans. That maybe we're talking about a flex game here, end of the year, for a team that possibly win and win the division. It is a lot on the line without a doubt. And that starts, like I said, this week in Cincinnati. Colts taking care of business as well. One thing, early preview, the Colts should on paper have the advantage in trick plays, George. I don't know what Zach Taylor was thinking, to put it kindly, when attempting not one, but two wide receiver passes. I don't know why he didn't learn from the first one when Jamar Chase basically spiked it into the ground and lost 10 yards when trying to throw it back to Jake Browning. I really don't know what it was Tyler Boyd, what he was doing when he caught the ball and threw a perfect spiral right to Josh Allen and gave the Jaguars a free touchdown, or set them up to eventually score an easy touchdown. You saw Shane Steichen yet again, almost a weekly thing from him, whether it's on special teams, whether it's on, just faking the punt and getting teams to burn timeouts based on who's running on the field, who's running off the field. He went into his bag of tricks again, had a nice little flea flicker there to Kylen Granson. I'm going to assume, George, when it comes to trick plays here, who's going to have the advantage, who's going to be on the watch, the Colts will have that advantage in that game, considering how the Colts executed on Sunday versus how the Bengals executed extremely poorly, not once but twice, in Jacksonville on Monday night.
You're right, though. That was going back and calling that second one, and that almost cost them. I mean, that set up the touchdown, put the Jaguars back in front. At that point, I thought, well, nice try, Bengals, good run, but then go back to Jake Browning and his ability to overcome all that, get back out there and win the game. I think that just shows you a lot of, what that Bengals team was made of last night. But yeah, the trick plays from Shane Steichen have been, like you said, almost a constant, whether it's special teams things that he does, but we've seen a lot of trick plays on the field. I mean, last week you had the Zaire Franklin play and then 30-yard bomb to Mo Alley Cox, and this week the tight ends get involved in this a lot. Apparently, this week you had the flea flicker to Kylen Granson, and he also had the tight end rush there on the short yardage, the fourth and one.
Right.
And, Granson's able to get that yard. So, I think the flea flicker in particular was interesting. For one thing, it was executed extremely well. I don't know if I've seen, the handoffs part of that go as quickly as it did, as the Colts did it. Normally that takes a little bit longer. They got the ball back to Minshew really, really quickly. And then Kylen Granson was talking about the play yesterday on the Zoom with his snakes. We'll get into that later. But he had patience. He said patience was the number one key. That's what they were talking about all the time. He had to wait. He had to time it out, but he had to wait and sell that. His release is too early. The play's not going to work. And he came off at the right. Well, he'll also get a call for a penalty if he's way too early, because at some point it's a run play. So you've got to be careful there too. But he timed it perfectly. Minshew made a perfect throw to him. It ends up being one of the huge momentum plays in a game that was full of it. But I think one of the most interesting parts about that play, it was initially installed for the Patriots game. And because of that, the name of the play was Germany, because the game was in Germany. And they called it during the Patriots game, but they didn't get the look that they wanted, and there was a kill option. So it got killed to a run play. But it was up before. It's been in there, 3-4 weeks? And they brought it back up again this week, got the look that they wanted from the Titans, and so they ran Germany and Nashville.
Two things on. Number one, I give Gardner Minshew credit. I wouldn't have the maturity to have a trick play called and check out of it. I don't care what the look is. If I'm under center, I'm calling that puppy, saying screw it. We're running it. So I'll give Gardner Minshew credit there for saying, you know what, not there. Let's not force it. All right, let's just hand the ball off here. and try to get a positive gain. So I'll give Gardner Minshew credit there, number one. Number two, though, George, I think it also highlights, like, to your point, just highlighting that specific flea flicker. Execution was perfect on all accounts. That's been the case for, again, whether it's rushing the punt team on the field, then rushing the punt team off the field. Whether it's the Zaire Franklin play, like every single wrinkle Shane Steichen had up his sleeve that's involved different units of the field, on the field, I should say, the Colts have executed to perfection. And it highlights just how well coached they are going off of the 2 punt blocks in a row. Again, going now, having these special plays change the game in a positive way because they're executed to perfection. And then you go back and watch the Bengals last night. Again, they survived it. But part of the reason why both those trick plays failed was just poor execution. Like, and part of it is they just gave it away. The Jaguars were expecting it, whether it was the look that was obvious, whether the Bengals gave it up right away. Like you said, there is, on every single fake special trick play the Colts have run this year, there is an element to selling it, not getting too excited. I think that goes back to coaching it in practice and making sure, hey, we got to be ready come game day to put this in. Like, we're not just going to practice it on a Friday and then install it on a Sunday and just say, let's see if it works. This is, like I said, it's the Germany play. This one here has been drilled for a few weeks. I know it was called and it was saved, but they've been practicing it now for a few weeks. You're assuming, and definitely so with how the execution's been flawless, that the punt team run off, punt team run on, offense run off, offense run on, without getting a penalty, without having too many men on the field, without having confusion. They have practiced these plays, and the attention to detail has been outstanding. And again, just as another example, and you look around the league, this really reinforces it, how well coached the Colts are, not just with Shane Steichen, special team wise. Again, the defense has really turned around as well. Defensively, Gus Bradley. It's just each week you see a new reason to believe this coaching staff going forward is absolutely the right one in place, and it's going to take the Colts. You would think, as long as health is there and obviously things break their way, you have a really, really good chance here for the Colts down the road to be in the mix every year and win a Super Bowl with this coaching staff.
I think the players buy into that too, which I think is a huge part of it. Brian Mason, special teams coordinator, deserves all the credit from this week.
Yes.
But I also think, like, it goes down in the assistant coaching ranks. I mean, we've talked about Tony Sparano being, arguably the MVP of this team this year, and the job that he's done with that offensive line and getting them back on track, but also doing it through injury. They lost Braden Smith during the game on Sunday, and Blake Freeland, again, a rookie, comes in and you don't notice Braden Smith is gone. And that It says a ton about Blake Freeland and where he's at, but also about Tony Sparano, the belief he has in instilled in those offensive linemen. But Tom Manning, the tight ends coach, came up with the play last week. The Zaire Franklin play was a Tom Manning designed play. And I think that's one of the things that they do a lot of as an offensive staff, much like it was under Frank Reich here, much like it is in Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni. Very collaborative effort. Jacksonville down there with Doug Peterson. Everybody's involved in the game plan during the week. And I think, it just feels like right now they've all got trick plays from their history, wherever they've coached before, that they've seen run that they liked, or they've seen run against them that they liked. And they just keep throwing it into the mix. And the thing right now is we don't know how deep that bag goes, because every week there's a new one. Who knows what we'll see in Cincinnati on Sunday.
I was going to say, it seems like there's no limits to how deep the bag goes, because each week you're like, all right, that has to be the limit of creativity. Like, there's no way, like, Shane has to be tapped on new ways to put guys in position to succeed. And each week, again, whether it's special teams, whether it's offense, whether it's including other guys from other units that come in and serve as decoys. I mean, would you be shocked? Maybe we'll have a Grover Stewart package on Sunday in Cincinnati, George. Maybe you'll get what you want and finally get a Grover Stewart carry. Maybe it's Zaire Franklin going back on the field now, having him catch a pass. Like, whatever it is, I think nothing is off limits. Maybe Matt Gay runs the ball. Like, I don't think you can rule out anything when it comes to right now Shane Steichen and his level of creativity, because he's showing you right now, except there's no limit. The bag is endless when it comes to the trick plays.
You just gave me an idea. There's what they need. Zaire Franklin and Grover Stewart in the backfield together. But mix it up. Let Zaire be the lead blocker on at the goal line from the one. Let Zaire go in there, lead the way, give the ball to Grover, and punch it in for a touchdown.
I like it. Sign me up. I'm in.
That'll be
That's going to be a lot of fun.
I don't. Who knows what's next? I mean, and it's got to be a little bit nerve wracking to prepare for, because I would imagine every week you're going back through and you're looking at all these trick plays they've run, and you're thinking, and he's not got a lot of credit for it nationally, but everyone always went nuts about Bill Belichick does something on defense you've never seen every week, because he did. I don't know about this year so much. If he does, it doesn't work. But that was one of the things during the height of the Patriots dynasty. That was always two things you talk about most: Tom Brady and his clutch ability to just, don't leave him a second because he's going to win the game, and Bill Belichick and the different looks he would have every week. They didn't do it all year long, but against you, they do it. Shane's been that way on offense. I mean, this is what we've just been talking about. They get different looks, they have different game plans, but there is something every week that this Colts offense does that they did not show at any point prior in the season. And I think that's got to be keeping defense coordinators up at night.
Without a doubt. And one other quick thing I want to mention here, your Patriots thing just sparked the stop, but this is Colts related as well. Going again, highlighting the improvement, and I think also the better coaching as well. Fewest points allowed in the league since week number 9. The Patriots right now are number 1, 46 points allowed. Their record, 0-4. Now, this is where the Colts involved. The Colts are 5th. They've allowed the 5th fewest points in the league since week number 9, 67, 4-0. So again, we talked about the liability that was the defense for the middle part of the year. The Saints game was exaggerated, obviously. The Browns game was highlighted as well in a negative way. To Gus Bradley's credit, and part of it is opponent, but also, too, I think part of what makes a good team is taking care of business when you are playing a lesser opponent. The Colts defense has stepped up, and now that's taken some pressure off the offense where they don't need to make as many plays to win. But it just shows overall the coaching staff, Steichen, Brian Mason, Gus Bradley, assistants as well. A great point with the Tony Sparano Jr. highlight, because that offensive line continues each and every week to make you think about them less and less, which is one of the nicest and best things you could say about the offensive line is when we're not talking about them, that's, they're doing a damn good job as well, no matter who's out there. They have done a tremendous job facing adversity, overcoming obstacles in the season, overcoming, early season struggles. They have found a way to where, again, they are just finding different ways to win and really rounding in a form here as we roll into the midway point in December and playing their best football, which is a lot of what playoff teams do. This is the time when you peak, and you're starting to see it now offensively. You're starting to see it defensively, special teams as well. This team is well-rounded, and I think all 3 units, you could argue, are really coming into their own now in the most important part of the season.
There's no question about it. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the numbers, but talking about that defensive improvement, anecdotally, it looked like they did a lot better job on DeAndre Hopkins this time around. I think he ended up with like 75 yards or something.
Yes.
But it just didn't feel like he had the impact on the game that he had in the first meeting. And what's impressive about that to me is Will Levis is a bigger threat to throw the ball deep than Ryan Tannehill. So I think there was much concern that Hopkins could be the game breaker in this game. And he had his moments. He had some plays, but he didn't have that game breaking, play where it shifted momentum into Tennessee's side permanently. And I think that, is a testament to how much the secondary is improving. You go back to that Saints game and the plays that Shaheed had, you're thinking it's going to be a long season. This continues. It's going to be a long season. They have now, since just in the last 2 weeks, we talk about opponents and the situation, but Mike Evans and DeAndre Hopkins made plays against them, but they were not game-changing plays that cost your team the victory. They're 2 pretty good receivers. And it's just, this secondary is maturing. I think they've done a better job of giving the defensive line that extra second straight week, by the way. The Colts get 6 sacks 2 weeks in a row now. And a lot of that has to do with the rush and cover combination coming together. I think you're going to – to preview the Thursday pod, I think it's a big key on Sunday against Cincinnati is hanging in there long enough against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to let that defense get home on Jake Browning. That's if you go back through the Bengals, even when Joe Burrow's there, what caused them the most trouble is pressure, specifically pressure up the middle, which Buckner and Grover, I'm sure, will be very excited to provide. So we'll see how that goes. But you got to tip the cap to Ron Milas as well. We're talking about assistants because that young secondary has really matured through the year. And that's one of the things we said back in the summer when we didn't think this team would be in playoff contention is watch like the young guys improving. Are they better in December than they were in September? That's one of the key elements for us this year. Well, you are in playoff contention. And yes, a lot of these young guys have taken really big strides.
And I think, too, it's like a philosophy change where it's like, you're not going to shut down DeAndre Hopkins. You're not going to shut down for this week Jamar Chase. You're not taking like there's no Darrelle Revis or there's no elite corner that you're just going to say, oh, we're taking him out of the game. But it is like that fighting mindset that this entire team has that it feels like the secondary is taking on greatly here the last few weeks is, yeah, we'll give up big plays, but we're going to keep on fighting. Mike Evans got his, he got his and scored a touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins got his at times, scored a touchdown. Derrick Henry, just the overall defense, Derrick Henry looked like vintage Derrick Henry in that first quarter and a half, 2 touchdowns, running all through the Colts, breaking arm tackles, looked unstoppable. But then the second half, and really midway through the second quarter outside of one drive in the fourth quarter where the Titans tied the game, Colts defense bottled them up. And so it's one of those things where they keep fighting. That mentality is exactly where it is, where they understand we're not going to shut you down. But what we're not going to do is quit. We're not going to have you have this great day. We're going to just give ourselves a chance. And they gave, like I said, the secondary has given the defensive line a chance to get home. The defensive line, depending on, has given the secondary a chance as well, but by getting pressure consistently. And like I said, now 12 sacks in the last 2 games. Also, by the way, 3 forced fumbles? Like the 2 with Will Levis are both weird, but both fumbles that neither the Colts didn't recover either. And both were very weird in their own right. But they're getting pressure, right? The strip sack on Baker won them the game 2 weeks ago. And so that they are giving themselves defensively a chance here where it's not going to be the best unit in the NFL, but they're also not going to be the worst unit in the NFL. Like, again, at times we saw against Cleveland, you make that argument. Saints make that argument. The Jaguars even at times make that argument. Like, it looked pretty bad at times. And to their credit, they just keep on fighting and don't allow the big plays or a slow start get them down and rattle them the way we kind of saw earlier in the season. So that's
huge.
Yeah, mentality-wise, massive for this team. And going into this game, like I said, you're not going to shut down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon, but it's like keeping that mentality of not getting down despite them making big plays early. I think is a big difference in why this team, again, continues to find ways to win games late and continues to win these one-score games. Really quick here, George.
There's just one thing I wanted to, because you kind of sparked it in my head. It's a leftover thing from the post-game pod that I don't think got talked about a lot. That game-tying touchdown drive by Tennessee, it should have been a game-winning touchdown drive had they made the extra point. That defense was incredibly fatigued. That came after the 2 back-to-back block punts, so they had basically been on the field for 3 straight drives at that point. And it's something I forgot to talk about on the pod. It's the NFL. There's no excuses. But I just don't think that we talked enough about that Sunday. Anybody talked enough about that on Sunday that, that was an extremely fatigued defense at that point.
That's a really good point. I didn't really think about it. You're right. Like you never see 2 block punts. So you're not used to it. You barely see 1 anymore. And so you're right. It was outside of 3 plays, basically defense. That's a good point, George. You're right. That's a really, really good point and excusable, if you will, as to why you allow the Titans to drive down the field when you're on the field for whatever it was, 10 minutes straight. Tough. Absolutely very tough. One thing I want to mention to finish off the pod, George. We talked with Kylen Granson and highlighted his trick play and also 4th down jet sweep. Watch out. There's more Shane Steichen creativity. You were on Zoom with him yesterday. I noticed he was doing Zoom from home. In the background, he has 2 pet snakes, huh?
Yeah, that was something. And that's one thing about Victory Monday is that usually the players are at home because you don't have to come in the facility unless they need treatment. So, you end up, they call them from home. So normally it's not much interesting there. It's because they're just, whatever room that they're doing the podcast in, there's nothing really. Sometimes a dog or something's in the background. Jack Doyle used to always have his dog back there, which was always fun. But and then a very Jack Doyle thing, right? Like you just imagine that's how that goes. But snakes was a first. I can't remember there being snakes on a Zoom before. And they have interesting names. I thought that was an interesting. So one is a ball python, and its name is Basket. So it is Basket the ball python, which is an interesting name there. And the other one, I can't remember the exact.
At least according to Kevin Bowen, it looks like it's Hefe.
Its name is Hefe.
Mexican black king snake.
Mexican black king snake. So its name is Hefe, the Spanish word for boss. So it's a king, it's the boss. You put a lot of thought into these names. That being said, yeah, I don't want to visit Kylen Granson anytime soon.
I was gonna say, I think this team, like, I think part of the reason why they're winning is they're really tight. Like, they love each other, love being around each other, and we saw that last year, the opposite, when things were going really south. This team splintered, let's just say, when things are not looking very good. One
Snow
thing
Angels coming to mind there.
The issue is we could sit here and rattle off how many different examples last year to show the lack of togetherness. There's more than one, unfortunately. Not to be a bad teammate here, George, but if I was a Colts player, let me tell you, Kylen Granson seems like a nice guy. I am never going over his house. Never. He's only coming over my house. We'll only hang out at the facility. You invite me over on a Monday, on a Tuesday. Kylen, love you. Thanks. No thanks. I ain't going anywhere near those snakes.
No, thank you. But apparently he's a big reptile guy. So, more power to him. He's a really interesting guy in general. I mean, you saw the photo shoot with his first touchdown. It was, the firstborn. But he's a really literate guy. He's big into like reading and promoting reading in young kids. Obviously loves to study reptiles. He said he has insect colonies somewhere in the house.
Oh, jeez.
He is definitely an interesting dude. And a guy who had a pretty big impact on the win on Sunday.
I mean, not to get too deeper, but I think one of my fears in life is a loose snake.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's probably top 3. Maybe drowning, but like loose snake. I'm out. I am leaving the city of Indianapolis. If I am Kylen Granson's neighbor and he comes over, hey, by the way, if you see my ball python or a Mexican king snake, he got out. I'm leaving the house. I'm leaving everything I have. I'm sprinting to the airport and saying, get me the hell out of here. Oh, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know. I love animals, not a big snake guy. I'm assuming that the king snake is non-venomous. I mean, it sounds venomous, but I'm assuming it can't be, right?
You would have to hope. If not, there's probably going to be a clause in the next contract. any future snake is non-venomous. I don't know. That's maybe the next question for Kylen. Find out any of these snakes, can they kill you? Because that does seem like a pretty important question to ask.
I mean, you were on the Zoom yesterday. I'm just looking at a picture that Kevin Bowen posted on Twitter. The tanks don't look very big, so I'm assuming they're not big snakes. I don't know, a couple of feet. I mean, that's, again, for me, that's way too big. But I'm assuming that he doesn't have like a 10-foot python in his house that could kill him, hopefully.
I mean, not yet. I don't know what a ball python.
Oh, true.
That's something to look up. I don't know how young. They're new. I know they're new additions to the family. So I assume they're young. And we'll see from there. But yeah, that is not something you're going to see me get involved in. That won't be a hobby for me.
That's how this. I know what you're not doing. I know what I'm not doing. Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, is watching the pet snakes when Kylen's in Cincinnati. Sorry, buddy. Absolutely. Call someone else. I don't. The amount of money you want to give me, there's no check big enough to say, hey, come over, look at my snakes, maybe feed them. No, thanks.
No, I definitely don't want to do that either. Like no.
Yeah.
We lived in Florida for 6 years, and I would say the snakes were I was more concerned with snakes than I am with crocodiles and gators.
Agreed.
Because I can at least see the gator. I know he's over there. Those snakes, they're sneaky.
They are, and you never know where they're going to pop up. Right? You buy a pond. Okay, I'm assuming there's a gator in there.
Exactly.
You see that, right? The gator's in the street. Oh, there he is. I'm just going to go the other way. Like I said, they get into small spots, come out of nowhere. I mean, I've lived in the Northeast, so never thankfully had to deal with snakes at all. But that's one where, no, thank you.
We just got little snakes in the yard, like little garter snakes. And they don't necessarily scare me, but I don't like them. I'm not happy when I see them. Like, oh, awesome, there's a snake. Apparently get Kylen to come over and, round a few of them up.
Would you pick them up? Are you brave enough to pick up a gardener snake?
I do it with like tweezers sometimes, like, longer and get them out of there. But it's not, cause I've been in the house a couple times. So that's not down in the basement. I like to get down there. So that's not fun.
You're not Steve Irwin? Jumping on it?
Not Steve Irwin.
Wrangling it?
Definitely not. You never know at our house. We look wildlife all the time. There was a possum that died in the backyard about 2 weeks ago. And, that's fun when the dogs discover things like that. But snakes, no. We got 2 dogs. I'm fine with that. I do not need snakes ever as pets.
Agreed. Add wildlife wrangler now to your job title. Holy cow. Yeah. Snakes, possums.
You never know what's going to happen here in Anderson. You never know what you're going to find in your yard in any given day. And
just like the Colts is here, you never know what game you're going to get, what performance you're going to get. And right now, the year of unexpectedness, whether it's in the animals in your yard or the Colts right now, this magic carpet ride they have at 7-5, it does continue. You never know what you're going to get.
Or the snakes on Zoom.
That's true. That is true. All right. A fitting end, I think, to this pod here, George. Again, like you said before, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Blue Horseshoe Podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well. We will be back on Thursday. Playoff game. Essentially, your Colts at the Bengals. Jake Bryan looks like Joe Burrow 2.0. How deadly is that passing attack going to be? We'll go behind enemy lines to get you set for Colts Bengals here when we talk to you next, which is on Thursday. So have a great rest of your week. Up until then, we'll talk to you on Thursday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.